Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Thursdays with Mike. And I have a couple of questions this week that I might just be dealing with one of them as opposed to two. But my thought is they are related. I think they're connected. I think we can tie them together. And so buy two sparrows with one farthing because we've killed enough birds with stones. So yeah, if we can buy two birds with one farthing and deal with both of these, that'd be great. So on to the question. This was a question texted me by a good friend of mine, Tess. Hello, Tess, if you're watching. Hey. It was a marvelous exchange. Actually, took place when I was still in Maryland. Right, I think it was like the last Sunday I was there. Pastor Mike, how can Second Chronicles 7:14 be brought forward to today? Um, it was a promise God gave Solomon when he dedicated the temple, and he also gave the reverse promise that he will uproot Israel, reject the temple, and have it destroyed if they forsake the Lord. Is this promise renewed anywhere in the New Testament? Okay. And I don't think it was Tessa's intention, and it's certainly not mine, to rain on anybody's parade. And I think there's a recognition that when any group of people cry out to God, the potential for God actually listening and changing direction, that is a consistent thread through both testaments, both the Tanakh and the Hebrew tradition, as well as that spirit carrying right on into the New Testament. If anything, it's intensified there. It's not just a people, a national entity calling on God, and thus God responding based on his relationship with them as a national entity. But in the New Testament, it very much is taken home into an even more primal context of we are his sons and daughters. Um, and so what son, if he asks for bread, is going to be given a rock instead? What daughter, if she asks for a fish, is going to be given a snake? And so if you who are evil know how to give good gifts to their children, then how much more will your Heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask him? So that opens it up to all of humanity and transcends national borders and boundaries. So in that sense, okay, there's a theme of divine responsiveness to the human condition when we just say, we're hungry, we want bread, or we're asking for fish, or we're saying that we have royally made a mess of our lives. That God is Abba, our Papa, our Father responds to us. But specifically to this one, and this is how I answered it, specifically to the issue of Second Chronicles 7:14 being taken as kind of a national promise that we would want to like attach to the like to the American flag, essentially. This was my response, and I'll elaborate a little bit here, but I did have fun with the response. Honestly, it's yet another key instance of our cafeteria style treatment of Old Testament texts, prompted by the rather toxic historical presumption that America is the new Israel of God, rather than just being a primarily Goyish mix of people trying to do this democracy thing. Yeah, I had fun with that. She particularly liked the Goyish mix of people trying to do this democracy thing. The text, and if you're still with me, if I didn't just like, okay, yeah, this guy's, he's out of here. Let's just read the full text and just be thinking again about the kind of transfer that's necessary. And the question is not, is God going to respond to us as a people, corporately, as my own family, or as our church family, or as our national community? The question isn't whether or not God's going to respond, but the question is again, is this something we can say, yeah, America is this? Okay, so Solomon, when he had finished building the temple of the Lord, the Second Chronicles 7:11, and the royal palace, and had succeeded in carrying out all he had in mind to do in the temple of the Lord and in his own palace, the Lord appeared to him at night and said, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple for sacrifices. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people, who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully, as David your father did, and do all I command, and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne as I covenanted with David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the decrees and commands I have given you, and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot Israel from my land, which I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. I will make it a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by it will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? People will answer, okay, I really read that wrong. All who pass by this will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple? And people will answer, because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why he brought all this disaster on them. Period. End of dream, end of divine communication. And then it goes on to all of the other glorious things that Solomon did in 2 Chronicles chapter 8. So looking at this, and we do the cafeteria style approach to the Old Testament, which isn't restricted to our use of the Old Testament, extends to both testaments. We do tend to go through like we're a chuck-a-rama. It's like chuck a Bible, and we're just picking out what we want on our plate for the moment. And so verse 15 is great, and so we'll find it frequently just excerpted and extracted, and then there it is on our plate, and we'll put over some red, white, and blue gravy. And so there it is. But if you follow through, of course, with the whole thing, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, and the whole context of this is prayer towards a specific place, that is the temple, and its sacrifices, the place where God says my eyes and my hearts will be. If we're saying this is a national promise that's transferred now to America, which is, okay, that's a huge assumption in itself. God has relationship with all nations. You'll see this theme arise in the prophets repeatedly. And yet there was a unique promise to Israel that has never been duplicated with any other nation. I just came across this morning, randomly in my reading. 2 Samuel chapter 7 is where I was this morning. And this was God's response to David when David says, I want to build this temple. And God says, no, it's going to be your son Solomon. So this is like communication prior to this fulfillment of this dream of building a physical temple where there would be physical sacrifices and prayers offered and so forth. And God says, no. David's response is, you're great, Yahweh God. No other equals you. There is no God but you, as we have heard with our own ears. Your people, Israel, are unique over all the earth. They are the one nation on earth whose Yahweh sets out to free them, making them your own, making them renowned over all the earth, and driving out nations with their gods before your people, whom you set free from Egypt. You established your people Israel as your own forever, and you, Yahweh, have become their God. So your people Israel are unique over all the earth. That's a claim pretty well sustained. You're right from Exodus 19. He called them to be his own people, his peculiar people. And yes, that's transferred to us as believers. But in a sense, we've done a historical transfer nationally, where America is like the new Israel, and we are the city up on a hill. This is the new Jerusalem, and this is the promised land, the land of promise, etc. And so all of that imagery then comes over, and we become God's 12 tribes of Israel. We're the 144,000. which is a bit of a, you know, making that transfer from the divine bank. I think we're going to find that we overdrew our account, is what happened, because there's uniqueness to Israel, and as we read through the New Testament as well, particularly when Paul gets to kind of his climax of argument in Romans 9 through 11, it's that yeah, Israel is irreplaceable, and the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. Okay, and there are layers to that too. It's just we can't just make a straight exchange and say, "Oh yeah, this is us now," just like people in any other nation, Argentina or Zambia or Switzerland can say, "Yeah, this is us. We're this unique." No, that's Israel. Pretty much that's Israel. But you go through, and I can see right now I'm not getting to the second question, so I'm just we'll save the second sparrow for next week. Um, but you look through here and again make those correspondences. We want to say the nation is the United States. Well, then what's the temple? Is that the National Cathedral? Because we can't go literal. Well, I guess we can. We do this all the time, but we do it's a bit whiplashy because we are going literal on our nation being the new Israel. Therefore, this promise applies to us. But the temple is metaphorical, or it's like the metaphor of the temple of the body of Christ and so forth. But it just begs the question: if it's a literal nation, there's a literal temple. Yeah, so is that the National Cathedral in D.C., or is it the Mormon Temple in Salt Lake with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir? Great candidates. We have lots of great candidates who could line up for the distinction. And then you go on through there. As you walk before me faithfully as David, your father, did. So that'd be George Washington, our founding father, the keeping and observing my decrees and laws. So that's the Bill of Rights. That's the Constitution. And well, then the whole business of being uprooted, and becoming a byword and ridicule and being left a heap of rubble. And all of this because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods. And looking at the history of the United States, we of course could ask, well, just who are our gods, right? Or who is our God? Boy, that's a nuanced question. I'm getting myself into so much trouble here. But it's not too hard of a stretch to say, well, our gods would be power, wealth, security, individual fulfillment. We've got quite the little pantheon of gods, to be sure. And it's probably one of the most stinging things I heard, just bringing this up with someone and talking about it just even earlier today. And the immediate response is, yeah, well, but what if we're more Egypt than Israel? And it's like, wow, okay, there you go. Yeah, what if we're more Egypt than Israel? God had a relationship with Egypt as well, but it wasn't the same relationship he had with Israel. Clearly, Book of Exodus demonstrates that, which is the whole point of that 10 plague thing. And then there's the reality that if we are more like Egypt than we are Israel, if we're more oppressor than oppressed people set free, as we look at the long view of the history of our nation, then might we not then be in the same position as Jeremiah with his own people of Israel? When, it wasn't a matter of praying more and praying harder, but actually recognizing that a yoke was coming and it needed to come. This was a cleansing that needed to happen so the land could have its rest and enjoy its Sabbaths, and the poor could finally get out underneath the load of what was an oppressive power structure. Yeah, I'm getting myself in all kinds of trouble, but the problem is that's what this text is addressing. And yeah, it is a dicey business. We just need to be careful when we are lifting a verse out and then dressing it up, or again putting it on our plate and then pouring on the gravy of whatever national pride that we might have, whatever nation we might be in. It's just a dicey business. Does God respond to us when we, as a community of faith, when we as just our own personal families of faith, as individuals of faith, and then as a nation that is, crying out together, if such a thing should happen, instead of crying out against each other, but actually crying out together. Does God respond? Well, yeah. It's just like the story of Jonah. Jonah, of course, didn't hold an evangelistic crusade. Okay, and which kind of gets into the second sparrow to buy for 1 farthing question, which we'll do next time. But he didn't hold like a crusade in Nineveh. He just walked into the city and started yelling out that in 40 days you're all toast. And I didn't realize it until this, just reading through it with my Hebrew group this last Sunday. If I was going to tell the story just from memory, I would have said that the king proclaimed a fast and the whole city responded. And that's not actually what happened. What happened was that you had Jonah coming in, Yonah, actually, the dove, coming into the city, giving his very terse, to the point message of doom. And it was a grassroots response. It says that the people, just like dominoes, started falling on their faces. Everybody's responding, and they're crying out, and they're taking off their normal clothes and putting on this rough sackcloth, which is what you would do culturally when somebody in your family died. So it's a posture of mourning, and then word comes up to the king that this is what's going on, and then he actually makes it official. He and all of his household fast and proclaims a fast. And in fact, not only are humans to wear sackcloth, but all the animals as well. And the animals aren't to get their food, no fodder, no pasturing, no shepherding, and so everybody's crying. Everybody's unhappy in the city of Nineveh. And it says God saw what they did. God saw what they did, and God, in turn, cried. Nacham is the word. He was deeply stirred and was just like, I was just about to wipe these people out. Look at them. I hear the cows. Do you hear the cows and the sheep and the lambs and the goats? Do you hear how they're suffering? And so, yes, God responds. But so we don't really need to do this. We don't need to appropriate that. We can take it in the spirit of the story, the book of Jonah. But it's just a lesson. And maybe this would be seen as picking, and that's not my intent. It's just to answer the question, which once again, has this been transferred over? No, but the spirit of God responding to our prayer is something that intensifies the further we go through Scripture. But as far as nationally appropriating this, so that's our national treasure, and something we can add on to the banner of our nation, no. Again, rather toxic historical presumption that America is the new Israel of God, rather than just being a primarily Goyish mix of people trying to do this democracy thing. Let's just keep trying to do that well, and let's keep crying out, so that we don't end up in a heap of ruins. And we do have a loving Abba who wants to see us thrive individually, as families, as a church community, and as a nation, for all people who are here or who will be here. So there you go. So that's it, folks, for today. Thanks for listening in. I will see you next time.